took a Year 10 PE class on basketball. Within this class, differentiation is needed as there are 3 boys that are highly skilled at sports. The remainder mostly falling in the mid-range category with some highly anxious girls and one student with ASD who has identified movement weaknesses. Lesson structure. I structured the lesson to begin with 2 warm-up games, then into a game sense approach, and finally into gameplay. The lesson was structured around basketball skills as this was the sport they'd been learning. This lesson aligned with the Teaching Standards 2.1, Knowing the Content, 3.2, Plan, Structure and Sequence Learning Programs, and 3.3, Use Teaching Strategies. Teaching Methods. I used a direct approach to explain the task and instructions to the students. Direct instruction is very effective for explaining and introducing tasks. Direct instruction can also be used to clarify instructions during gameplay. I also used an inquiry-based approach to promote engagement, motivation, and learning through use of cognitive knowledge, bodily experience, and communicative skills. Within a physical education setting, this can involve teamwork, thinking of strategies, and learning from mistakes. In the lesson, the inquiry model was utilised within the majority of the games. During the end zone drills, students had to experiment with how they could effectively use the space and learn from their mistakes to win the game. Students had to think of strategies as a team to optimise their performance. The game sense pedagogical practice is an approach to a modified sport that engages students in minor and modified game strategies and concepts. It encourages players to think tactically about their movement and skill set to make better decisions within a realistic game setting. Within my lesson, the game end zone is a game sense approach as this game is very similar to basketball due to the court positioning and passing. As an activity, there were also moments when I used indirect instruction. Indirect instruction is a student-centered approach to learning where students observe, investigate, and draw conclusions from data. The teacher takes on a role of a facilitator. An example from my lesson was when one team kept doing really long passes, so the other team kept intercepting the ball. I stopped the lesson and asked this team what other strategies they could use to stop the interception. I facilitated the discussion, but the students supplied the ideas. Suggestion involved utilising a visual demonstration to support verbal instructions. The majority of the classes required differentiation and task simplification, which was an area of weakness for me initially. One of the underlying differentiations for most students was to ensure comprehension through a variety of strategies. Within this practical PE lesson, the feedback was to provide a visual demonstration of each game/drill. I had overestimated the general abilities of the students to listen, process, and apply complex verbal instruction. Visual demonstration assists students who are visual learners and assists all students to process verbal information. My assumption was that students weren't moving much due to poor motivation. However, I came to learn that many students hadn't processed the instructions. In hindsight, I should have provided a visual demonstration of each task to ensure students understood what was required. A second suggestion from my supervising teacher related to differentiation for a specific student with an ASD diagnosis. She suggested that the student could have performed the activity at a walk first without the pressure of processing and performing at pace. This student has some balance, movement, and coordination difficulties compared to peers. So that the students weren't signalled out, I could have required all students to walk through or a small group to walk through as part of my visual demonstration. A walkthrough following a verbal instruction would have provided the opportunity to experience and successfully achieve the movements at a slower pace before requiring the pace to increase. My supervising teacher suggested that I needed to set my behavioural expectations at the commencement of the lesson. This included boundaries of behaviour, my expectations in terms of attending and staying on task, and also the use of the whistle requiring immediate student response. Instead, I initially expected the students to have the same behavioural standards in my lesson as I had observed during my supervisor's lessons. I hadn't considered the factors which might influence students to alter their normal behaviour. Setting firm boundaries first could have alleviated student anxiety and reduced the interruptions of students testing boundaries. Teaching standards. Teaching Standard 1.1, Physical, Social and Intellectual Development and Characteristics of Students, is about demonstrating knowledge and understanding of physical, social and intellectual development and characteristics of students and how these may affect learning. Within my practical lesson, I should have demonstrated my knowledge of how the students learn through performing a demonstration of the drills, as the students are very visual and need a visual stimulus to perform an activity. Allowing this would have demonstrated knowledge and understanding of how students learn. Teaching Standard 1.2, Understand How Students Learn, is about researching how students learn and implications of this. Within my activity, students needed the visual demonstration to have knowledge of how to complete the activity. The implication of this was that students were anxious about completing the task due to a lack of instruction. Asking students to perform a demonstration and directing them would have allowed a coherent comprehension of all students within this class, therefore meeting this teaching standard. Teaching Standard 1.5, Differentiate teaching to meet the specific learning needs of students across the full range of abilities. This standard is about being able to differentiate teaching to meet the specific learning needs across all students. Within my lesson, specifically the student with ASD should have walked through the drill to rehearse. Allowing the student to walk through the activity would have been catering to their diverse needs and meeting this teaching standard. Feedback for future lessons. Within future lessons, I will always include a demonstration with the verbal instruction. I need to increase my level of direct instruction. This will promote understanding and comprehension of the task. This could also limit behavioural and participation issues as students will have a clear idea of what skill is required from them. I'll also make sure to continue to cater for all needs of differentiation, which involves asking some lower level students to perform a walkthrough of an activity. This can help to reduce their anxiety about the task and promote inclusion within the activity, as students that don't understand the task can quickly become frustrated and begin to act out due to anxiety. Within the future, I need to observe how the students learn practical activities, making sure to examine if they are visual or kinesthetic learners. This will give me a better idea of how to explain and simplify tasks further to adapt to learning. Also, setting behavioural expectations at the beginning of the lesson allows me to set my boundaries.